Okay. And yeah, that's what I'm going to do right now. Okay. Learning sponsors, Year of Learning, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of Toby Paris, Sarah Tobler by Yisrael Dove in her memory, Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine in memory of Ramona Levine, Rachel Mata Bat Asher, friends of Nina Monesta, Nechama Asna Bat Yitzchak Aharon, many friends of Stephen Vigdal, Zechen Nishmat, Simcha Melech, Memea Leib Halevi, friends of Marcy Kurtz in memory of her great niece, Leah Brach. A month of learning by Stanley Presser in memory of his wife, Chaya Leah Bat Zev HaKohen, in honor of Vicky and Larry Fish by their children and grandchildren, Rebecca Witonsky, Lewis and Susan Witonsky in memory of Rebecca's uncle and Lewis's brother, Pesach Ben Yosef Yehudis, Carol and Josh Sanborn in memory of her mother, Ita Bat Nachman Ben Yaman. We have a week of learning by Shmuel and Henya Hadassah Novik in memory of his mother, Leah Bat Yaakov, by Lenny Bahar in memory of her husband, Yitzchak Ben Menachem, by Evelyn and Isaac Blackhor in memory of her sister, Shana Yehudis Bas Harav Yeshayahu Yitzchak Halevi, by Sharon and Michael Glass in memory of her father, Shlomo Ben Yosef Kohen, by Jack Gilman in memory of his father, Yitzchak Ben Avram Ayin. We have, today is what day? I don't know. What? 10th. Okay, that's it then. May Hashem is having a Aliyah, crank Rafiel Vati Yeshua Hashem Matzviyah, and L'chol B'nai Yisrael, good to bench there.
Amen.
Okay. All right. So where are we on Sadi Hay? Yeah, I know, and it says on the top of Sadi Hay, right? We saw Achot Isha, the B'mezid. Okay, that's where we ended with Achot Isha. The B'mezid lo asira bin de'oraita, b'shogeg lo gazru ba rabbanan. And that's where we stopped off, right? Okay, that there was not the Torah mandated there, but it was in terms of a mistaken situation. The rabbis did not make any decree. Okay, remember we talked about the fact that she didn't like her Yavam, her brother-in-law, and that she didn't. All right, or maybe she did. The question is, would she do a justifiable examination? A complete. Now, umina lam de lo asira. And on what basis, says the Gemara, do we say it's not prohibited? The Tanya Ota, because we darshan, says the Braita, the word Ota in regards to Sota, in the example of Sota, right? Ota, right, it says meaning her, Ota, shechivata osarta. Her, because it was the fact that it was her sexual liaison that was what was considered to be making the prohibition. Okay, ve'en shchivat achota osarta, but it's not whatever situation that happened to her sister. Okay, okay, all right, is not what causes the prohibition. Sheyachol, says the Gemara. One could have thought the following, right? V'halo dinhi, a dinhu, but perhaps we might argue that there is a kal v'chomer here, namely umamakom shaba al isur kal, in a situation where we say that one commits, okay, and in this case we're talking about okay, a certain sexual activity, okay, which we consider might be considered a minor prohibition. Lesser. Okay, lesser is a good, right. Okay, lesser is all right. Okay, and we're going to talk about what it is, right? Ne'asar ha'oser, then the one who committed namely the husband, is prohibited. Makom shaba al isur chamor, in a situation where we want to call it a greater sin, okay, right? Okay, and in that case, it's a right. Okay, a no din shene asar haoser, should it also not be in a situation there that the male who committed it should also be prohibited with his wife?
Because of her existence, the Isur exists.
No, not because of her existence.
Yeah, Reuben is married to Sarah. Sarah's sister.
It's the question of the act.
Only because Sarah exists.
No, I don't like that. I don't like that explanation.
That's how it works.
Okay, Okay, it's because of the question of his act with her. Okay, in that
His act
situation.
with her is the Aveira.
That's right.
But
So wow. So therefore, the Gemara is going to say, how can you call that a lesser
no, but that's no,
sin?
that we're
Okay.
talking about Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi
Yes,
Yossi
I
says,
understand.
if you cause it, then you become usher too.
Right. That's
So
the question.
Sister, the woman.
The
married
question
to
who
the man,
causes it.
Right.
She
That's the issue.
causes
The
Isser
question
on
who
the
causes
sister.
it. Is it him who causes it,
No, it's
or
her.
her it causes?
No,
Not
he
always.
can be with the sister if it weren't for the fact that he's married
We'll
to
see.
the other sister.
We'll see. We'll get to that. We'll
Right,
see.
right.
Lo nichlaku beit Shammai u beit Hillel. So what happens? Okay, so the Gemara says, isn't that the case? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, this is Rabbi Yehuda. Lo nichlaku beit Shammai u beit Hillel, that Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel did not disagree on this discussion. Okay, v'ba al chamato, in a situation where one had relations with their mother-in-law. Sheposel et ishto. Is that the question that therefore is going to
Forbid
for
his
him
wife.
to be totally forbidden to have any further relations with his wife?
Again, it's because
Okay.
the mother-in-law is her mother.
Well, that we understand. Amar nichlaku. So what then did Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel disagree? But ba'al achot ishto. Okay, with the question of having some sort of relations with the sister of his wife. Shebeit Shammai omrim posel, that according to Beit Shammai, any kind of relations with the wife's sister now renders his wife totally forbidden to him. Beit Hillel omrim, but Beit Hillel says lo posel, that it doesn't render his wife forbidden to him. That's the point. Amar Rabbi Yossi. However, Rabbi Yossi says as follows, giving a different point from Rabbi Yehuda, right? Lo nichlaku Beit Shammai u Beit Hillel, ba'al achot ishto. That the argument between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, in terms of one having some sort of sexual liaison with the sister of his wife, shelo posel et ishto. It does not, in other words, that's not what they're arguing about, whether it invalidates any further situation with his wife. Alma nechlaku, says Rabbi Yossi, and what did they argue? Baba al chamato, when he may have had relations with his mother-in-law. Shebeit Shammai omrim posel, that Beit Shammai says then it makes relations with his wife invalid. Ubeit Hillel omrim lo posel, and Beit Hillel says it does not invalidate. Lafi shebetchila hu mutar b'chol hanashim sheba'olam. Why? Because originally the Gemara is telling us, right? He was permitted to with all women in the world.
One at a time.
Of course. All right. Vehi muteret b'chol ha'anashim sheba'olam. And she would have been available, I'm going to use it that language for a moment, to all men in the world. Kidsha, they engage, okay? Who, osra, he therefore renders her prohibited to others, okay? Vehi asarto, and she, once they become engaged, renders him prohibited to all other women.
No, to a certain smaller set.
We'll get to that in a second.
But it can't
You're
be
right.
all.
You're right, but I want to wait
Yeah,
that
but
in
you
a
can't say
second.
all because you could have other wives.
Okay. Miruba isur she'asra. But the Gemara says, hold on a second. There's a difference in the subset as to who is prohibited. Okay? His prohibition is less than her prohibition. She is prohibited, we said, to all other men. Okay? The women that he's prohibited to is a much smaller subset. So that's why the Gemara says greater is his prohibition that she did to small, right?
Her being married gives a greater.
Prohibited, right? That's the case. Me isur she'asrahu. Okay, right? So therefore, the one that he did to her is a greater prohibition than that which she did to him. Okay, namely, says the Gemara, Shahu, right? Yeah. Shahu asra b'chol anshe sheba'olam. Why? Because she now becomes prohibited to all other men in the world. Right? Vehi lo asar tahal ela bikrovotah. And she becomes prohibited.
He becomes prohibited.
Right, and he only becomes prohibited to her relatives. Okay? So the Gemara then says, so this v'halo dinah, doesn't this seem to be a kal v'chomer, a logical deduction? Umahu she'asra b'chol anashim sheba'olam, whereas he made her prohibited to all men in the world, right? Shigaga, right? Be'isur la, okay, when it was done inadvertently, right? Towards her, right? Einan ne'aseret. We're going to say then that his wife, okay, was not going to be prohibited to him if there was an accidental liaison with his sister-in-law, right?
No. If she accidentally is with someone, doesn't matter.
Okay, b'mutar la, okay, but right. So here, b'mutar la, okay, she's prohibited, permitted to her husband, right? He, okay, regarding her, shelo asar tahu ela bikrovotah, whereas her in the engagement only, okay, I'm sorry, him with regards to the engagement only becomes prohibited to her relatives, right? Shagag be'isur lo, okay, if there was again an inadvertent liaison, okay, regarding him.
Now it's her sister.
Yeah, right? And now, right, that's with her sister. A no din shalom asar lo b'mutar lo. Should it not be logical, asks the Gemara, that it would be prohibited for him, one who was ordinarily permitted to him, namely his own wife, right? V'zeh din l'shogeg, says the Gemara. And this is the law, this is the logical consequence regarding a situation of shogeg, of inadvertent liaison. Okay, lemezid minayin. So what about a mezid situation where there was intent there? Talmud lomar ota. Therefore, we bring in that pasuk from Sota and understand it here too. That we say it's based on for her, namely ota shechivata osarta. That it was her liaison, okay, that therefore renders the act a prohibition. Ve'ein shchivat achota osarta. And it's not the
sister's
right.
misbehavior
It's
doesn't
another
ruin it. for her.
exactly with her sister's husband. It doesn't ruin it for
No, her husband and her sister doesn't ruin her
right
relationship with
to her
husband.
husband.
Right.
That's what I'm
Of
saying.
course it does, but that's
That's ve'ein shchivata achota. In other words, with her sister's husband doesn't render
her
it.
sister husband's not involved. When her husband is
No,
with
it is her
sister,
sister's
it does
her
not
husband.
render her assert to
To
her
her
husband.
husband, yes.
Not the sister's husband's not involved at all. He's the guy with the gun behind the door.
I don't know. It's different than the Vishinantam explanation, I'm telling you. Amar Rabbi Ami says Rabbi Ami now is going to give another alternative explanation. Okay? Amar Reish Lakish in the name of Reish Lakish. Ma'itama de Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reasoning behind Rabbi Yehuda's explanation? Okay, Dichtiv, why? Because it's written, Be'esh yisrafu oto ve'ethen. Remember we had that part of the pasuk yesterday. Okay? By fire they will burn him and them. Called habayit kulo b'sreifa, asks the Gemara. Are we going to say that in together, him and both women, okay?
His wife and his
And the
mother.
woman who
His mother, because the
well,
pasuk is talking
his
about
mother-in-law.
his mother.
Yeah,
Right, the mother-in-law.
right?
Mother-in-law.
So it's,
Her
and
mother.
if
Her
it's
mother, her
all
mother.
three of them,
Right.
right?
So she gets roasted because he's fooling around. That's correct.
Right? So that's the question. Ve'im eino inyan l'sreifa. So the Gemara toasted instead of roasted. Thank
That's true.
you. Okay.
Because she has-
Right? So the Gemara says, fine, you may say that we're not going to deal that all three of them are going to get punished with Sreifa. At least say that we've got to mention that there's an Isur here, Right.
There's some
right?
implication.
Taneu inyan le'isura. Then at least teach it that there is an incident here, an aspect here of prohibition. Okay? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. And so Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel the following. Ein halacha Rabbi Yehuda, that the law is not like the view.
That she can stay.
Okay.
With her.
In other words, that the implication is, again, that it is even in the mazid situation. Okay. Hahu da'avad isura bechamate. Okay. Now we have a situation where we have a little maisa. All right, a little story where there was a certain person who did a prohibited liaison with his mother-in-law. Achi Rav Yehuda, Nagde. Rav Yehuda, he was brought before Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda gave him malchus, gave him flogging. Amar le, and he said to him, he loved Amar Shmuel, ein halacha Rabbi Yehuda, were it not for the fact that Shmuel had said that the law is not like the view of Rabbi Yehuda, asrata alayich isur da'olam. I would prohibit her, namely his wife,
I wouldn't.
okay, okay, forever. All right. So Gemara now comes back and wants to deal with a previous statement in what was said.
What did it mean?
Okay, it said that there was an isur cow, a lesser, all right, I use that term, right? A lesser prohibition. What is that lesser prohibition? Amar Rav Chisda. What's the example? Says Rav Chisda. Machzir grushato mishanis eit. He suggests it's the fact that somebody takes back their divorced wife. Okay.
After she marries in the
Second, I was going to get to that. Okay, he takes back his divorced wife where she has been married in between. Okay, so the Gemara says, Ba'aleha hai. Okay, if the second husband has had relations with her, Asra aleha dahai. Okay, then in that situation, the first husband, or then the other one is also prohibited to her. Bahaleha idach. Okay, if the first husband had relations, Asra aleha dahai. The
that
second,
ruins it for number two.
that ruins it for number two, exactly. So the Gemara says, Lama lemachzir grushato mishene seit. Okay, what do we mean when we say that he has taken back the wife that he divorced when she married somebody, second husband already? Okay, shekain nitma haguf v'isura barov. Okay, v'isura isur olam. Okay, three examples. Number one, shekenit mahaguf. Okay, that physically it's detame, it's detestable, right? V'isura barov. Okay, and second example, that this is a prohibition that applies in general to the community. Okay, and third, v'isura isur olam. Okay, and third, that this is severe because it is a ongoing. She's forever forbidden to him. So the implication being, how then can you call this suggestion an Isur cow, right? Ela Amar Reish Lakish. But rather Reish Lakish says another example. Maybe the example of an Isur cow is with a Yivama regarding the Zikuka. Yivama Leman, okay? How can we say this is in regards to a Yivama? What situation? In lema le'echad le'acher. Okay? If we're going to say it's to another, ukederav himnuna. Okay? And this follows the perspective of Rav Himnuna. The Amar Rav Himnuna is said by Rav Himnuna the following: Shomeret Yabam Shazinta. Okay, if you have a sister-in-law who is waiting, let's say, for Yibum or Chalitza, whatever, and she fools around, right? Asura liyabama. She is prohibited to her Yabam.
And he has to
Okay.
only can do.
And he only right, he can only do chalitza, right? Mali Yabama shekenit mahaguf v'isura barov. But the Gemara challenges it and says, but even in the case of Yabama, how could you call that a lesser, okay, offense? Why? Because there too, we can say in this situation, her body is now tamei, it's right. And secondly, this is a prohibition across the
Applies to
community, right? Ella rather, Yibama la'achim, but rather we're talking, he says, trying to justify this explanation that she was a Yibama regarding the other brothers, and therefore it affects them.
Yeah,
Right.
Reuben does Mimer and then Levi.
Right, that's what the Gemara is going to get to shortly. Okay, Avad ba ma'amar hai. Okay, that one of the brothers did a ma'amar to the Yabama. In other words, made a commitment. We'll use that word for the moment, right? Asra aleh dahai. She's therefore forbidden, okay, to any other brother or brothers, right? Ba'aleha idach. If another brother, so to speak, jumped the gun and had relations with her, in other words, right? Idach asra aleha dahai. Then she is prohibited to any other brother or to the mamer man, clearly. My area Shabbat Hashemi. So what then is the fact so unique about saying in this example that she had relations with the second? Afilu avad banami mamar. Even if the other brother, okay, simply made a mamar and did not even have relations with her. Why do you have to bring up the issue,
Why do you
the
have
language of Leah's? Right? Lo kashas, he says, it's not necessarily problematic. Ke Rabban Gamliel, because we could say this is like the view of Rabban Gamliel, Da Amar, who says, Ein ma'amar acha ma'amar, that one cannot have one brother do one ma'amar and then another do another. Therefore, that's not a good example to give us an explanation of what the Isur Kal was. Okay? All right. So now we try another. And remember, we've always said when we have Ella, rather, it's an attempt by the Gemara to come up with another case, another example. What is this case? Natan la get. All right?
Brother two gives her a get.
All right? One of them gives her a get. Right? And what happens? Va'afilu chalatzla. Okay? And even if he did chalitza, and therefore not as an issue of sexual relations whatsoever. Okay? Ela amar Rabbi Yochanan. But Rabbi Yochanan says, well, just the case. What's the case? Example of a sota. Maybe all of a sudden he's going to call sota a Isur Kal. Let's see.
Well, because of who it is.
We're going to see, right? Sota laman. How could it be that we could say the sota then might be a case to use that as proof, okay, for Isur Kal? Ba'aleha ba'al. Namely, the husband, even though she had been secluded, secluded with another individual, okay, and he's not supposed to have further relations with her, okay, all right, what happens? Okay, the husband did have relations with her, asra aleh de bo'el. He therefore prohibits her to her paramour, okay? My area ba'aleha. Why do we have to specifically say here that he had relations with her? Afilu natan la get. We could have said maybe if he just simply give her a get. Va'afilu amar ein ani mashke. Or if he simply says, I'm not going to force her to drink the soda water. Ella sota the boel.
So those aren't good examples.
Right? Those aren't right. Ella sota the boel. But in regards to the woman and her paramour, hi isur kalhu, can we say this is really a lesser prohibition? Isur chamorhu, this is a great prohibition. Okay, a major prohibition. Dahainu eshet ish. Why? Because that fellow had relations with a married woman, right? So the Gemara says, fine, go to Amud Beis and see if we come up with another possible answer, right? Ella Amar Rava. So rather Rava says here, Eshet Ish. We are talking about a situation of a married woman. V'chein ki ata Ravin Amar Rabbi Yochanan Eshet Ish. And likewise, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael, he cited Rabbi Yochanan and said he also understood the situation in terms of Eshet Ish. Umay kare la isur kal. And how then can we call this a lesser prohibition? She'ein ha'osra osra kol yamav. That maybe we're saying that she doesn't become prohibited to him for all the time.
He doesn't prohibit her to other
Right.
men forever. He can either die
Well,
or
he-
divorce
Well,
her,
that's
and
what I
she's
was going to
with
say.
the other
She'ein ha'osra osra kol yamav. That she's not permitted, prohibited to him all his
other men.
life. No, I don't like that.
Well, it
to
has
all
be.
his
Has to be.
life.
She's mutter to the
No,
husband.
wait. No, in other words, so the implication, I'm just telling you what the Perush here is.
Then you're reading.
In Hebrew, I read it wrong?
It has to be because
No,
when Rivka is married to Shimon, she's not allowed to be with anyone else.
right.
As soon as Shimon
But the
dies
point
or
is,
gives
he's going to give her a
she
get
can go to someone
any
else.
other man. That's the
Right.
point. So let
therefore,
me
He
finish.
does not usher her.
Let him finish. So
forever.
that's right. That's what the Gemara is saying. She'eno osra osra kol yamav. That prohibition does not prohibit all his days.
Correct. But
Yeah,
it's
right.
the use
In other words, what he can do then is give her a get.
Yeah.
or divorce or
That's
die.
Well, I
Have
think
good
the
grace.
implication I have here is he gives her a get.
Yeah, well, obviously.
Okay.
because-
Tanya Nami Hachi. And we have a Braita that teaches this. Abba Chanan Amar Mishum Rabbi Elazar. That Abba Chanan said in the name of Rabbi Elazar, Eshet Ish. That here also we're talking about
the married
the
woman.
married woman. Uma babakom haba'al isur kal. And we say in this situation where we're bringing the example of a lesser prohibition, she'ein ha'osra osra kol yamav, that this prohibition doesn't result in her being prohibited to him his entire life. Okay, ne'esar, okay, prohibited. Okay, ha'oser, therefore the one who committed the act. All right, the paramour is prohibited. Haba'al isur chamor. Okay, so therefore in that situation, okay, what that is considered then a greater or a more serious prohibition. Sheha osra ko yamav. In other words, relations with the wife's sister. Okay, that is the greater, right? May be considered the greater permission because she's prohibited all the rest of his days. Right?
Even if they get divorced,
Right.
he can't go with her.
Right. Okay. Eino din shene'asar ha'osra. Is it not then logical that his wife should therefore be prohibited for him? Talmud Lomar, however, here the text tells us, Ota, her. Ota, shchivata osarta. It is her liaison that makes the prohibition. Ve'ein shchivat achota osarta. Okay, and it's not any liaison vis-a-vis her sister that renders the prohibition. Okay. Right, now, we go on now with a further explanation. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Kol sheposel v'chule. Okay, Rabbi Yossi who said one who renders it invalid to others, renders it invalid to himself. One who renders it invalid to himself renders it invalid to others. Okay? Ma'ika Amar Rabbi Yossi. What did Rabbi Yossi really say here? Okay? Ilema de Ka'amar Tanakama. If we're going to say that what he's referring to is the statement by Tanakama, the Azil Ishto v'giso l'medinat hayam, that his wife and his brother-in-law went on a sea journey, right? What happens? Eshit giso asira v'ishto sharia. It seems then to be saying that the wife of his brother-in-law, okay, is prohibited to the brother-in-law, but his wife is permitted to him. Right? That's what it seems to be saying. V'ka'amar la Rabbi Yossi. And is this what Rabbi Yossi is really saying? Ki hechi de'ishto sharia, that where his wife is permitted, right? Eshit giso nami sharia. Maybe his
She should be permitted to her husband.
right, the sister-in-law should be permitted to her husband as well.
Right.
Ihachi, okay. If that's the case, then the phrase that he said, Rabbi Yossi, Kol she'ein posel al yedei acherim, ein posel al yedei atzma. How is it possible that he could say that one who doesn't invalidate for others, okay, doesn't invalidate for himself? Namely, says the Gemara, Kol she'ein posel al yedei atzmo, eino posel al yedei acherim mibayeh leh. He should have phrased it differently and said, whoever doesn't invalidate for himself doesn't invalidate for others. Right? Va'ela. Okay, but rather the following. So he's going to give another explanation to what Rabbi Yossi's statement was. Ki hechi de'eshet giso asira. In a situation where the wife of his brother-in-law is prohibited, ishto nami asira. His wife also should be prohibited. So the Gemara says, hatenach, for the time being, that seems logical to understand what he was saying at the end. Kol sheposel, kol she'eno posel. In terms of one who invalidates and one who doesn't invalidate. Maya vidate. So what do we say here? What are we doing? Amar Rabbi Ami Aresha. Says Rabbi Ami. No, his reference was to the earlier statement in our Mishnah. Okay? Namely, Niseit al pi beitin, where the woman was married with the permission of the court based on the testimony of a single witness. Right? Teitzei. She must be divorced. Uptura min hakorban. And she is exempt from bringing a korban.
Because she did what Bezdin told.
Right. Al pi edim. Okay, if it was based on two witnesses, teitzei, she must be divorced, right? V'chayevet b'korban. And we are requiring that
it's a real shogeg.
Okay, that she requiring that she bring a korban. Okay, my guess is she would need to bring a Asha. Right, probably both a kachatas and a nasha.
What?
She may have to bring an asham also.
No, because she
was it's a shogeg
absolutely
situation.
With the guy. It's a shogeg.
Right. Okay. So the Gemara then says, Yafeh kocho shel beit din shepitra min korban. That shows the strength of the Beis Din, that it exempted her from having to bring the korban. V'ka'amar Tanakama. And thus it was said by Tanakama. Oh, okay, and now another possible explanation. Lamed Shin, Lo Shana, Al Pi Edim. Okay, there's no difference, or rather, whether it was by two witnesses. The right, the Eshet Giso Sharia. Okay, that then the wife of the brother-in-law should be permitted. Velo Shana Al Pi Beitin. And there should be no difference if it was done by the declaration of the Beis Din based on a single witness, right? the Eshed Giso Asira, that the wife of the brother-in-law should be prohibited. The Ka'amar le Rabbi Yossi. And this is what Rabbi Yossi meant to explain to us. The following. Al pi beit din, the posel al yedei acherim, that when it occurs through the declaration of the Beis Din, and it invalidates, okay, for others, posel al yedei atzmo, it also makes it invalid or forbidden, however we want to term it, right? For himself.
So both wives have to
both wives would therefore be
both wives need
divorces, right? Both the brother-in-law's wife and his own wife, right? Okay. Al pi edim, when it's a situation where she has married based on the testimony of witnesses, de'eno posel al yedei acherim, that therefore that does not invalidate the situation for others. Eino posel al yedei atzmo.
And they can both go
It does not invalidate the situation for him, namely each of the husbands.
Each of the husbands may retain his original wife.
Rabbi Yitzchak Nafacha Amar. Okay, so what does Rabbi Yitzchak Nafacha say? Le'olam asefa. No, Rabbi Yossi's whole explanation was really based on the end of our Mishnah and not the earlier part of the Mishnah. And we've got a little section there in parentheses, which we'll skip. All right. Ha da'azle arusato v'giso. Here we're going to say that it was his fiance.
They weren't. They didn't have Nisuyin yet.
Right. That's the fiance, right? No marriage yet. V'giso and his brother-in-law. Ha da'azle ishto v'giso. But here we had one example of his fiance and his brother-in-law. Here we had a different example where it was his wife and his brother-in-law. V'ka'amar Tanakama, and was said by Tanakama, Lo shna ishto v'giso, v'lo shna arusato v'giso, that there really is no difference, okay, between the wife and the brother-in-law and the fiance.
There's no difference between an Arusa and a Nisua.
Right. Well, you want to explain it that way. I understand. Okay, between the wife and the brother-in-law and the fiance and the brother-in-law. In other words, regardless of whether she was an Arusa or a Nisua, right? Eshed Giso Asira V'ishto Shaya. That the wife of his brother-in-law is forbidden to the brother-in-law, and his wife is permitted to him. V'ka'amar le Rabbi Yossi, and this is what Rabbi Yossi therefore was explaining as follows: Ishto v'giso deleka lememar tana'a hava le b'nisu'in. Okay, that with the example of the wife and the brother-in-law, there is no possibility of saying that there was a Tanai in regards to this, to a situation of marriage, of union, right? De'eno posel al yedei acher. Okay, that therefore that does not invalidate it regarding another. Eino posel al yedei atzmo, and it doesn't invalidate it in regards to himself. Arusato v'giso. But the example of the fiance and the brother-in-law, where it's possible to say that maybe there was a t'nai, a condition in terms of this particular engagement, okay, regarding the feasibility of proceeding with the wedding. And if that t'nai was not met, therefore that engagement is invalidated, right? Posel al yedei acherim, that invalidates it regarding others. Posel al yedei atzmo, and therefore it also is going to invalidate it regarding himself. Okay, what happens? A new piece. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. It says Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel. Halacha ka Rabbi Yossi. The law is like Rabbi Yossi. What happened, however? Matkifla Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef challenges that.
That's an ambiguous statement because the halach is always like Rabbi Yossi in a debate with Rabbi Yehuda.
Right.
So he can't mean straight.
Right? Umi Amar Shmuel Hachi. And did Shmuel really say that? Vaha'itmar Yibama. But here he was the one who talked about the Isur Kal being the example of the Yibama. Rav Amar Harehi Ke'eshet Ish. And Rav said the example was in regards to a married woman. Ushmuel Amar Eina Ke'eshet Ish. And Shmuel said it was not vis-a-vis the example of a married woman. Va'amar Rav Huna. And Rav Huna therefore says, Kigon shekidesh achiv et ha'isha. It's a situation where one of his brothers became engaged to the woman. V'halach lo l'medinat hayam. Okay, and that engaged brother was the one who went on a sea journey. V'shama shemet achiv. And he heard that his brother had died. Va'amad v'nasa et ishto. And he went and married, okay, they returned the fiance. Okay, she came back, the other guy didn't.
No, only
No,
he
no,
went.
no.
He went. So the one that was the
disappeared.
fiance,
Here he's dead. So
Right.
another brother hops
the fiance,
widow. Well, she's an arusa. So
She's
it's a widow.
yeah, the fiance.
right? She was the
All right, whatever
fiance,
you want to call it.
right? The Rav Amar, Harehi be'eshet ish va'asura yaba. But Rav says, no, being an arusa, even though she's not in Nisu'ah, she's still in the same halachic status as an Eshet Ish, and therefore she is prohibited to that brother-in-law.
Yeah,
Okay.
because,
Right? Ushmuel Amar, Eina ke'eshet Ish, v'shayale. But Shmuel says, no, she is not in the status of a fully married woman, and she is permitted to that fellow, right? Amarle Abai, says Abai, Umimai dechi Amar Shmuel halacha keRabbi Yossi. Okay, and why is it then that Shmuel says, right, that the law is like Rabbi Yossi? Ad Rabbi Yitzchak nafcha ka'amar. Okay, maybe it was more in terms of what
he's interpreting Rabbi Yossi the way
Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha said. That's what I said. Rather, maybe it's the way Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha said it. Dilma ad Rabbi Ami kama, or perhaps even the way Rabbi Ami explained Rabbi Yossi's view. Ve'inami ad Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, and if it's also the view of Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, mimai da'apose. Okay, and what was the basis that he became invalidated? V'dilma a'eino posel, and perhaps is a situation that he did not render him, right? That invalidated. Okay, so we'll finish up. Inami. Okay, perhaps that's the case. Mimai de'ita l'derav huna. Okay. Okay, and what was then the situation with Rav Huna? Dilma lete de Rav Huna klau, uba de Rav Himnuna kimiflage. Right, and that's where we'll stop right there. Okay.
Very early. Don't.
All right.
Okay, yes,
All right.
I said whatever day you want to take off.
Okay, let me give it some fun.
Thursday.
What?
So did we do it in 38 minutes?
We did today in 30.